I was 12 in year 8.
So about like 13 years old.
I was 15. Basically, all of my friends did it, so I just hung around with them so much that I was like, why not?
These are the voices of secondary school children who all vape. We're not giving their names to protect their privacy.
The main reason why I vape, it's not the feeling, it's not the flavour, it's the tricks. That's what you see on social media as well.
You mean like making shapes with the smoke?
Yeah. It's almost like I'm doing it to look cool.
They're speaking to FYI, that's Sky's news and current affairs programme for children, about why they do it.
My friends, they'll be doing it in school and the toilets and stuff like that, and they can't go a day without doing it.
And they're not alone. Latest figures from the NHS suggest 9% of 11 to 15-year-olds do it, despite it being illegal.
I definitely say I'm addicted. Like every 2 or 3 days I have to like buy another one and everything, so I do spend quite a lot of money on it as well. And then like you're basically paying to have problems with your body, obviously, but it's kind of hard to get off it when like all your friends are doing it. You just don't want to be the odd one out.
Now the government is launching a crackdown on the illegal sale of e-cigarettes to under 18s. And Rishi Sunak says he's particularly concerned about vaping ads that appear to target children.
It's illegal to sell vapes to children, but yet we know that more and more young people are, and we want to stop that.
But is this enough? I'm Leah Belesso, and this is the Sky News Daily. In a minute, I'm going to be speaking to a head teacher and also someone from the vaping industry. But first, I thought it would be a good idea to hear a bit more from some of those teenagers.
You get told so many things from different people, like one of my good friends who's 18, she stopped vaping, and then she got an after effect from the stopping it. She got gum disease from stopping vaping. And then other people were telling me, like the man that serves me in a shop, he tells me that there's no problem with vaping. So you get really mixed signals, and I guess I'm just not paying much attention to the bad side as much as I should.
I did see that it does affect health, and I don't do it as much as I did, but I was never really bothered by it because I'm young and I was like, I only live once, so like, just do whatever.
What I find a bit weird is that on cigarette packets, they have the photos, the warnings telling you to stop. But in vape ones, they don't. And if it's such a big deal when all these problems are happening, why aren't they not putting a photo warning on vapes?
I'm incredibly worried. I mean, it is easier for you to buy a vape pen than it is paracetamol if you're a young person. That seems to me to be the wrong way round.
This is Glyn Potts. He's the head teacher at John Henry Newman Roman Catholic College in Oldham. He looks after 1,500 pupils, and he's really concerned about how many of his students vape.
We just simply haven't regulated it quick enough to make sure that the young people who are attracted by these inordinately bright, colourful packaging, where flavours are, I believe, targeted at young people, like bubblegum flavour, we haven't kept pace, and that risk then is translated to our young people. And I, for one, am campaigning to try and make sure that this is brought to curb, because I don't believe it's in the best interest of our young people.
But Glyn, isn't it just normal for kids to experiment, break the rules every now and again?
I think all schools will face some indiscretions with young people, and traditionally we may well have thought of those as things such as the old smoking behind the bike sheds. But as technology around vaping and e-cigarettes has changed, this has become far more difficult for us to both monitor, but equally to advise the young people on it. And we are seeing more young people using vape pens than I would really like to, and it's causing some issues for us.
What type of issues? What's going on?
Well, I think from the first major issue for me is the welfare of our young people. I want to be a positive advocate for them, a voice for the difficulties they face, particularly during COVID and so on and so forth. And they want answers around what they believe to be a safer option than smoking, which is vaping. But they're not grasping the fact that these vape pens often are poorly constructed. They often have higher levels of nicotine in them than actual cigarettes, which is therefore a gateway access into smoking. And we don't know the long-term health challenges that such activity do to our young people. And there is some evidence about the impact and negativity towards adults, but very little towards young people. And I think that means that they are often taking a very, very risky gamble with their health.
How big a problem do you think this is becoming for young people?
It's created a bit of an undercurrent of challenge where we know young people are using them to gain money, but equally to pass on debts between each other for pens that they may have used, for flavours that they've pre-ordered off a friend, or from the fact that For some of them, they contain THC or CBD oils linked to marijuana, which they believe are going to give them the same high or the same health benefits that they're seeing on the internet. And therefore, all of that just creates an atmosphere of risk. And as teachers, it's incredibly difficult for us to combat that, but it's equally difficult for us to be able to advise young people on how to avoid those matters, other than simply say, don't take the risk.
Gosh, that's such a nightmare, isn't it, for parents, for teachers to try and control. What are you telling your young people about the dangers? How are you trying to get a grip on it?
There is some parents who believe that vaping is the lesser of the evils to smoking, and it just fundamentally isn't, with the amount of nicotine in vape pens. And there are those parents who use phrases like, well, we're a smoking household, so if they're on that, at least I know that it's not going to harm them. So we do work with individual parents, we do work with our year groups around curriculum and education, but we're also working with our partners in the NHS, our partners in the police, to try and make sure that the avenues whereby these things can be used for negativity are curtailed and narrowed. But it seems that every time we take a step forward, the organisations beyond us take two or three larger steps ahead away from us because of the sheer volume of use of these and the money that's involved.
The World Health Organization says that the consumption of nicotine in children and adolescents has damaging impacts on brain development and potentially leads to learning and anxiety disorders. But if you type NHS teenagers vaping advice into Google, then you don't get any of that. There are a couple of news articles with those stats I gave you at the start of this episode, that there's been an increase in vaping amongst teens, but the top result is an NHS page called Vaping to Quit Smoking. And it tells me nicotine vaping is substantially less harmful than smoking. It does also say vaping is not recommended for non-smokers and young people because it's not completely harmless. But it seems like there's just not much easily accessible information out there for kids who want to learn more. And there hasn't been extensive research into the impact of vaping on children. Now, this is something that vaping manufacturers recognise. John Dunn is Director General of the UK Vaping Industry Association.
I'm a father of 2 children myself, so I don't want to see any young person vaping at all. And it really comes down to how they're getting a hold of these products. And we've been pushing the government actually to take more action and stronger action for a number of years now. And one of the things that we're concerned about is the fines that retailers receive if they're unlucky enough to be caught is only around about £200 to £250, up to a maximum of £2,500, which frankly, I don't know a single retailer that's ever gotten fined that. Now, we want that fine to be increased to £10,000 per instance to make it really hurt for these rogue traders who frankly don't care who they sell the products to. We also want to see the licensing of vape retailers, because I go out with trading standards, I go out in the street and see it myself. We've got pizza shops selling these things, hairdressers. It's an age-gated product. It's illegal for anybody under the age of 18 to buy these products. But many of these retailers are either oblivious to that or they don't care about that. And we think that's a huge problem.
And what do you think the industry needs to do then? You're saying fines need to be bigger. That makes sense. But then when you look at the packaging, that's where I have a big problem as a parent. Some of them look like sweets. They're very colourful. You've got some that are even reminiscent to toys, like with unicorns on. If you're a smoker and you want to quit smoking, you're not going to need vapes that are similar to sweet packaging. It's just not necessary. That needs to change, surely.
I absolutely agree with you on that. Now, colours are often used with many products, including adult products, to denote different flavours, so I don't have a problem with that. But what I do have a problem with is like cartoon characters, for instance, or brands that blatantly rip off, well-known sweet brands like Skittles, etc. Now, technically, they are illegal. You're not allowed to do that. But one of the issues that we have is there is a registration process that brands that contain nicotine have to go through here with the MHRA. But the MHRA doesn't look at things like product design. They don't look at packaging design. So they're really only going by the name of the product. And in many cases, things like that slip through. Now, we think that's a mistake. I think all of those factors need to be looked at by the MHRA, who are the regulatory body, before they give the approval for these products.
As John says, MHRA, which is the Medical and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, do have rules about how products that sell nicotine are labelled, but they don't control everything about what they look like or how they're advertised. Now, this is something that's recently been picked up by the Prime Minister, who says that vaping ads that appear to target children are not right.
The adverts for these things are designed to appeal to kids, with the colours they use, the characters they use, flavours. This is all things that shouldn't be happening.
Well, first of all, as we said, it is illegal for anybody under the age of 18 to vape. It is not designed for anybody who doesn't currently smoke. And if you're a smoker, it is, a far better thing for you to do. Smoking, will kill you. 1 in 2 people who smoke will die from smoking-related diseases. Both of my parents died that way, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this. But, what we've got to look at is we've got to look at the evidence as compared to smoking.
I think it's really healthy, isn't it, to have a conversation around the fact that children in particular should not have nicotine in their system. We have research backed by the National Health Service in this country that says, there's been a rise in young people picking up these devices, consuming them, and the implications that has had on their health that we're all worried about, we're all concerned about. And we simply don't have enough information now at this moment to say what the long-term implications might be on young people. That's a worry.
You're not getting any argument from me on that. That's why, as a concerned parent myself, what I want to do is I want to cut off that supply. That's where the biggest issue is. And unfortunately, young people are very creative now in how they get information on where they can get these products. In the old days, like we were talking about, you always knew that news agents and you would tell your friend where they would go. Now they put it on Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and all of these other apps, so that information gets pushed around.
So, John, it's curious to me as a parent, as head of this manufacturer. How do you feel about where this industry is going? Because we're aware that kids will find a way of getting vapes, and there's a worry over the health implications for them. What conversations do you have with your kids about vaping?
I have very open and honest, discussions with my kids, and I'm lucky they don't smoke, they don't vape, and they barely drink, But that's not because they didn't have access to the products. I always have samples in my house that they could easily access if they wanted to. But I just talked to them about the facts. Vaping is not cool. It's not a smart thing to do. Luckily they aren't influenced by their peers. But it is tough for kids these days. There are so many influences out there. They try to emulate people on social media and things. And that's one of the reasons why, for me, I don't think vaping has any place on social media, especially on platforms like TikTok, for instance. But there seems to be reluctance with these type of platforms to do any age gating or any restrictions.
John says that retailers need to be held accountable and social media needs to be regulated when it comes to vaping. But the companies that make vapes are responsible for what they look like. And recent research by King's College London suggests that vapes sold in unbranded packaging like cigarettes would be less appealing to teenagers. Let's hear from head teacher Glyn again.
I think that has to be a completely regulated area. I think also we need to be working with local trading standards and with the police in a far more coordinated effort, because some of these shops will probably make far much more money off that than selling illegal alcohol, because they know the consequences of doing illegal alcohol. The young people who are buying these things are buying them through challenging circumstances. And if we can come up with a local solution that's backed up with statutory law and some form of fine for shopkeepers and those who peddle these kind of things, then hopefully we can avoid the majority of these young people accessing them. Because I believe if they start with vapes, I think they'll end up with cigarettes or they'll end up with something else, because the nicotine in them is of such an extreme level compared to a cigarette that it will always create that need for them.
Do you feel you have enough backup to do all of the things that are needed to curb children from using vapes?
I think it's a very difficult question to answer at the moment. Well, I think I've got the hardest working staff in education. I know that they will work with me to support this, but we cannot solve it alone. And I think to push it onto teachers is not a welcome factor, but it's one that we take as a moral duty and an obligation. But there really does need to be some grown-up thinking about how we manage this and moving forward, because for everything that we're pushing onto teachers, it takes them out of the classroom. And that therefore causes more challenges for us.
And your message then, finally, to the manufacturers who are putting these vapes on the shelves and they are ending up in shops, in hairdressers, in chicken shops. What's your message to them?
I'd ask them to step back and think cautiously about the impact of their work and the fact that we know a lot more about cigarettes now. Do they want to be remembered in history as ignoring those messages and therefore harming young people? Or do they want to take the moral high ground now and prove that this is an adult option that protects young people from gaining access to it? Because I think that they really should be taking a really serious look at their work.
I do worry about it a little bit because like it could be really, really bad, and in a couple of years I could be in a hospital somewhere because of it.
I'm sure I'm going to look back on it when I'm older, probably when I'm out of my teens. I'll be like, why was I even doing that? But I feel like that's a big part of growing up. You do things you're not supposed to do. This is clearly one of them.
My thanks to John, Glyn and to you for listening to the Sky News Daily with me, Leah Belletto. This episode was produced by Emma Ray Woodhouse with Alex Eden and Rosie Gillett. Our editor is Philly Beaumont.